I still remember the day my grandfather passed away, leaving me his beautiful, old mansion in the countryside, to be shared equally among my siblings and me. The news was bittersweet. We were devastated by his loss, but also grateful that he had thought of us in his final days. As we navigated the complex web of emotions, we began to realize that our grandfather's passing had also brought to the surface some long-standing family conflicts. One of the most pressing issues was the behavior of my younger brother, Ethan, who had a history of bullying and intimidation. I recalled the countless times he had picked on me and our siblings, and how our parents had often turned a blind eye, dismissing it as kids being kids. But when Ethan's behavior started to escalate, and he began to physically assault one of our siblings, I knew that something had to be done. I remember the day our parents were called into the principal's office to discuss Ethan's behavior. Our sibling had finally stood up for himself, and in the ensuing fight, Ethan had ended up with a bruise. But as our parents sat in the office, listening to the principal's account of the incident, it became clear that they were more interested in defending Ethan's actions than in addressing the underlying issues. The conversation quickly turned heated, with our parents insisting that Ethan was the victim, and that our sibling had overreacted. But as the discussion progressed, it became clear that Ethan's behavior was not an isolated incident. He had a long history of bullying and intimidation, and our parents had consistently failed to address it. As I looked on, I felt a mix of emotions: anger, frustration, and disappointment. Why had our parents not taken Ethan's behavior more seriously? Why had they not done more to support our sibling, who had been suffering in silence for so long? The experience left a deep scar, and it would take years for our family to come to terms with the consequences of our parents' actions. As I grew older, I began to realize that my family's dynamics were not unique. Many families struggled with similar issues: favoritism, neglect, and a lack of accountability. But what I also learned was that these issues could have long-lasting consequences, shaping the people we became and the relationships we formed. In my case, the experience had a profound impact on my relationships with my family members. I began to distance myself from Ethan, who continued to struggle with his behavior, and from our parents, who seemed more interested in enabling him than in addressing the underlying issues. But as I built my own life, free from the toxic dynamics of my family, I started to realize that I had a choice. I could continue to harbor resentment and anger, or I could use my experiences to grow and learn. Years later, when Ethan came to me seeking advice and support, I was faced with a difficult decision. Part of me wanted to turn him away, to tell him that he had had his chance to change and had blown it. But another part of me remembered the boy he had once been, before the bullying and the entitlement had taken hold. I realized that I had a responsibility to help him, not just as a brother, but as a human being. As we sat down to talk, I was struck by the enormity of the task ahead of us. Ethan's behavior was not just a product of his own actions, but also of the environment in which he had grown up. Our parents had enabled him, and our family's dynamics had perpetuated a cycle of bullying and intimidation. But as we began to work through these issues, I started to see a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could break free from the patterns of the past and create a new, healthier dynamic. The journey was not easy, and there were many times when I felt like giving up. But as I looked at Ethan, I saw a person who was struggling to find his way, to make sense of the world and his place in it.